Darkness creeps across the land of Persia. A mysterious sickness spreads, draining the life from the once vibrant kingdom. Whispers of an ancient evil, the devourer, echo through the land, its tendrils of shadow reaching ever closer. In this desperate hour, a flicker of hope emerges. Darius, a young captain of the Persian Guard, stumbles upon a legendary artifact, the sacred sword. This blade, imbued with celestial energy, is said to be the only weapon capable of defeating the devourer. Joined by the brilliant scholar Aisha and the wise Mithriza, Darius embarks on a perilous quest. They must decipher ancient scrolls, navigate treacherous landscapes, and forge alliances with unlikely heroes. Their journey takes them to the fabled Dragon Spine Mountains, a sanctuary for an ancient order known as the Sky Guardians. Here, Darius learns to harness the true power of the sacred sword, mastering the celestial energy that flows through its veins. But the darkness is not easily vanquished. As they approach the Devourer's fortress, Darius uncovers a horrifying truth: the Devourer is merely a harbinger, a pawn in the service of a far greater evil, the Shadow King. This malevolent entity seeks to engulf the world in eternal night, and Persia is just the first battleground. The Keeper of the Sacred Sword is a thrilling tale of courage, sacrifice, and the unyielding fight for light against the encroaching shadows. Join Darius, Aisha, and Riza on their epic adventure as they face terrifying creatures, unlock forgotten magic, and forge a destiny that will decide the fate of their world. Written and produced by the Zillion Pro. Chapter 1. The Persian sun, a merciless tyrant in the midday sky, beat down on the bustling marketplace of Persepolis. Beads of sweat trickled down King Azulu's brow, etching temporary rivulets across his weathered face. Despite the heat, his regal bearing remained unbowed. He navigated the crush of bodies with practiced ease, his keen eyes scanning the vibrant tapestry of the marketplace. Yet, amidst the cacophony of haggling merchants and playful bartering, a disquiet simmered within him. Whispers. For weeks, they had danced on the wind, carried by nervous citizens and echoed in hushed tones. Whispers of a coming darkness, a foreboding that gnawed at the heart of the kingdom. It wasn't just the whispers though. A strange sickness had begun to plague the usually robust livestock, their hides turning an unnatural shade of grey, their once lively eyes dull and vacant. The healers, their faces etched with worry, were baffled. Azulu, a man who prided himself on logic and reason, couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. He dismissed the whispers as mere superstition at first, but the sight of a once proud stallion reduced to a skeletal husk on the outskirts of the city gnawed at his composure. This wasn't natural. Reaching the cool shade offered by a towering sycamore tree, Azulu paused, taking a deep, steadying breath. Glancing towards the royal palace, its golden dome gleaming defiantly against the azure sky, a pang of responsibility tightened his chest. He was King Azulu, the Lion of Persia, and fear was not a luxury he could afford. Yet, the disquiet remained. He needed answers, and the bustling marketplace offered scant solace. With a resolute nod, he turned towards the palace, leaving the vibrant hubbub behind. Within the cool confines of the royal library, a haven of hushed whispers and the sweet scent of aging parchment, Azulu sought solace. Nestled amongst towering bookshelves that resembled canyons of forgotten knowledge, he found Aisha, the royal scholar. Her once vibrant hair was now streaked with silver, a testament to a life dedicated to deciphering the mysteries of the past. "Your Majesty," Aisha greeted, her voice laced with respect and a hint of concern. "You seem troubled." Azulu sighed, rubbing a hand across his brow. "Troubled? Aisha, something is wrong. The whispers, the sickness, it feels like a storm brewing on the horizon." Her eyes, usually twinkling with a youthful curiosity, held a somber cast. "Sire," she began, her voice low, "the whispers may hold more truth than you think." Intrigued, Azulu leaned closer. The library, usually a haven of peace, now felt heavy with unspoken secrets. Aisha delved into forgotten scrolls, her wrinkled hands tracing faded symbols etched onto brittle parchment. "There are tales, whispers of a time before, a time when beings from beyond walked the earth, harnessing powers beyond our comprehension." A shiver ran down Azulu's spine. Legends, myths, surely, she couldn't be suggesting. "They called them the Numinous," Aisha continued, her voice barely a whisper. "They came with machines that spat fire and metal birds that blotted out the sun. They brought terror and destruction." Azulu scoffed, a sound that echoed harshly in the hushed library. Myths, Aisha. Stories to frighten children. But Aisha shook her head, her gaze steady. These aren't mere tales, Your Majesty. There is evidence. Ruins scattered across the land, whispers passed down through generations. And the sickness. Her words hung heavy in the air. Could the sickness plaguing the livestock be a chilling echo of a forgotten war? Suddenly, the bustling marketplace, the vibrant tapestry of life, seemed fragile, threatened by unseen forces. Azulu, the lion of Persia, felt a gnawing fear, a primal instinct urging him to protect his people. Then tell me, Aisha, he said, his voice low but firm, how did this darkness end? How did Persia survive? Aisha met his gaze, a spark of hope flickering in her eyes. Legend speaks of a sacred sword, a weapon imbued with the power of the heavens. It was this sword that pushed back the numinous, that brought peace to the land. A sacred sword? The notion seemed fantastical, yet the weight of evidence, the fear in the people's eyes, Azulu, the man of reason, felt a glimmer of something else stir within him. Desperation. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was truth in the legend. Chapter 2. King Azulu dismissed the court with a wave of his hand, the echo of Aisha's words clinging to the air like dust motes in a sunbeam. Doubt gnawed at him. A magical sword? It sounded like a fable spun by firelight, a desperate hope clinging to the edges of a fading world. Yet, the conviction in Aisha's eyes, the fear etched on the faces of his people, they whispered a truth he couldn't ignore. He sank into his throne, the weight of his crown suddenly a burden. He closed his eyes, seeking solace in the familiar tapestry hanging behind him, a vibrant depiction of a past Persia, a land untouched by the whispers of a coming darkness. But even the vibrant colors couldn't dispel the image of the skeletal horse etched in his memory. A sharp rap on the chamber door startled him back to reality. Your Majesty, came Jafar's voice, the captain of the royal guard. Aisha requests an audience. Azulu straightened, a flicker of hope igniting within him. Perhaps she had unearthed some new information, some shred of evidence to bolster the fantastical claim of a sacred sword. Send her in, he commanded. Aisha entered, her movements brisk despite her age. She bowed low, the reverence in her eyes momentarily at odds with the urgency etched on her face. Your Majesty, she began, her voice raspy with excitement, I believe I may have found something. Intrigued, Azulu gestured towards a nearby chair. Please, Aisha, enlighten me. She drew a weathered scroll from the folds of her robes, its edges frayed and the parchment brittle with age. This, she declared, is a fragment of the Chronicles of Zarathustra, an ancient text believed lost 4 centuries. Azulu's pulse quickened. Zarathustra, a legendary figure shrouded in myth, was said to have wielded immense knowledge, a conduit between the earthly realm and the celestial. If this fragment truly held the secrets of a sacred sword. With trembling hands, Aisha unfurled the scroll. The faded script was in an archaic dialect, but she had spent a lifetime deciphering such mysteries. As she began to translate, her voice resonated through the chamber, weaving a tale of a bygone era. It spoke of a time when the sky bled fire, and monstrous machines descended from the heavens. These beings, the numinous, were described as creatures of metal and malice, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. They sought to dominate the land, to bend its inhabitants to their will. But hope flickered within the darkness. A chosen warrior, a descendant of the gods themselves, emerged. Zarathustra, blessed with celestial power, wielded a weapon forged from the very fabric of the stars, the sacred sword of Anahita. With each swing of the blade, he channeled the power of the heavens, pushing back the numinous and restoring peace to the land. The chamber fell silent as Aisha finished her translation. The weight of the past hung heavy in the air. This wasn't just a fantastical tale. It was history, albeit one shrouded in myth and legend. But if there was truth to the chronicles, then perhaps the sword, the very symbol of hope against the encroaching darkness, was real. Azulu rose from his throne, a newfound determination hardening his gaze. Aisha, he declared, his voice ringing with authority, we must find this sword. The scholar's eyes widened, reflecting both fear and a spark of shared resolve. But sire, she stammered, the location of the sword is lost to the ages. Then we shall rediscover it, Azulu countered. We have no other choice. He looked at Aisha, his gaze unwavering. Find every scrap of information you can. Every legend, every rumor. We will scour the land until we find this sword. Aisha bowed deeply. "As you command, Your Majesty." As the scholar hurried from the chamber, Azulu felt a surge of purpose course through him. He was King Azulu, the Lion of Persia, and he would not allow his kingdom to succumb to the darkness. He would find the sacred sword, a beacon of hope in a world teetering on the brink. Chapter 3. Days bled into weeks as the royal library transformed into a battleground of knowledge. Aisha, fueled by a desperate hope, toiled tirelessly, her sleep sacrificed to the deciphering of ancient texts. Scrolls, some brittle with age and others etched on forgotten metals, were unearthed from the library's dusty depths. Each one offered another piece of the puzzle, a cryptic clue or a whispered legend pointing towards the location of the sacred sword. Azulu, however, remained a reluctant participant. The tales of celestial magic and divine intervention clashed violently with his logical mind. He found himself drawn to the library, drawn to the flickering hope that danced in Aisha's eyes, but a part of him clung to skepticism, a shield against the fantastical nature of the quest. One evening, as the dying embers of the sun cast long shadows across the library floor, Azulu found Aisha hunched over a massive map, its parchment splotched with faded ink and cryptic symbols. He watched her trace a finger along a series of jagged lines that snaked across the eastern reaches of his kingdom, a region known as the Jebel Bar Mountains, the Sea of Mountains. "What is it?" he asked, his voice breaking the silence. Aisha looked up, a flicker of triumph in her eyes. "I believe, Your Majesty," she rasped, her voice hoarse from days of relentless study, "I may have pinpointed the location of the resting place of the sacred sword." Azulu approached the map, his skepticism momentarily forgotten. The Jebel Bar Mountains were a treacherous region, a labyrinth of snow-capped peaks and treacherous valleys, populated only by hardy nomads and whispered legends of mythical creatures. A daunting prospect at best. "This is madness, Aisha," he declared, his voice laced with frustration. "Sending a search party into those mountains, it's a suicide mission." Aisha straightened, her gaze meeting his with unwavering determination. "Then perhaps," she countered, "we need more than just a search party." Azulu frowned. "What are you suggesting?" "We need a champion, Your Majesty," she declared. "Someone skilled in battle, someone with the courage to face the unknown." Azulu considered her words. The journey would be perilous, requiring a warrior of exceptional skill. But who could he trust with such a critical mission? His gaze swept across the vast library, finally settling on a figure sparring in the training courtyard adjacent to the palace. Darius, the captain of the royal guard, moved with a lethal grace, his scimitar flashing in the fading sunlight. His past was shrouded in mystery, whispers of a foreign land and a shadowed past clinging to him like a second skin. But his loyalty to Persia was unquestionable, his prowess in combat unmatched. "I know just the man," Azulu declared, a spark of determination igniting within him. The next morning, Darius stood stiffly before the king, a mixture of confusion and suspicion etched on his face. Azulu, his initial hesitation replaced by a newfound resolve, laid out the situation, the whispers of a coming darkness, the legend of the sacred sword, and the perilous journey that lay ahead. Darius listened intently, his expression unreadable. When the king finished, a long silence hung heavy in the air. Finally, Darius spoke, his voice low and gravelly. "You believe in this magic sword?" Azulu met his gaze. "I don't know what to believe, Darius," he admitted, "but our kingdom is in peril. This is our only hope." Darius paused, his eyes seeming to pierce through Azulu's facade. "And what about me, Your Majesty? Why send me on this foolish errand?" Azulu held his gaze. "Because you are the best warrior I know, Darius. Because you are a survivor. And because, deep down, I believe even you understand the stakes." Darius remained silent for a moment longer, then finally let out a gruff sigh. "Very well, Your Majesty," he conceded. "I accept your quest, but I won't be going alone." Azulu raised an eyebrow. "And who else do you propose to drag into this?" A sly smile played on Darius' lips. "There's a scholar with a thirst for adventure, and a midge with a talent for finding trouble." He gestured towards the library door. "They might be just the companions I need." Chapter 4. Darius' words hung in the air, causing Azulu to glance towards the library entrance. His skepticism wrought with a flicker of hope. A scholar and a midge? They hardly seemed the ideal companions for a perilous journey into the treacherous Jebel Bar Mountains. As if on cue, the library door creaked open. Aisha entered, her eyes sparkling with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Following close behind was Reza, the royal midge, his white beard flowing like a snowy river down his chest. His ancient staff, topped with a gleaming amethyst, tapped rhythmically against the stone floor. "You summoned us, Your Majesty?" Aisha inquired, her voice laced with a hint of trepidation. Azulu cleared his throat. "Indeed, Aisha. Darius here has volunteered to undertake a critical mission on behalf of the kingdom." Darius, arms crossed, cast a sardonic glance at the king. "Volunteered is a strong word, Your Majesty." Aisha, however, seemed oblivious to the undercurrent of tension. Her gaze flickered between Darius and the map sprawled across the table. "The Jebel Bar Mountains," she breathed, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and trepidation. "The location of the sacred sword," Darius confirmed, his tone gruff. Reza, ever the pragmatist, tapped his staff against the floor. "A valiant quest, to be sure, but are we truly to believe in such fantastical legends?" "We have little choice," Reza, Azulu admitted, a hint of frustration creeping into his voice. "The whispers grow stronger, and the sickness continues to spread. This is all we have." Aisha stepped forward, her gaze unwavering. "There is evidence, Reza. Fragments of history, whispers of a warrior who wielded celestial power." Reza stroked his beard thoughtfully. "Very well," he conceded. "If there is even a sliver of truth to this legend, then perhaps it is worth the risk." Darius, however, remained unconvinced. "Fine," he grumbled, "but I won't be leading a band of scholars and mags on a wild goose chase through the mountains." Aisha, her chin held high, met his gaze. "And I assure you, Captain, I am no damsel in distress. My knowledge of ancient languages and forgotten lore may prove invaluable on this journey." Reza chuckled, a dry rasping sound. "Indeed, and my magical abilities might come in handy when facing the unknown perils that await us." Azulu watched the exchange, a flicker of amusement battling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Perhaps, just perhaps, this unlikely fellowship might be the answer to their desperate situation. "Very well," he declared, silencing the bickering. "We shall depart for the Jebel Bar Mountains at dawn. Darius, you will lead this expedition. Use your skills to ensure their safety. Aisha and Reza, lend your knowledge and abilities to the cause." Darius grunted in acknowledgement, a hint of respect flickering in his eyes. Aisha, her face alight with determination, bowed deeply. Reza, his staff tapping a steady rhythm against the floor, simply smiled, a knowing smile that spoke of a life well lived and a wealth of hidden knowledge. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the palace courtyard, an unlikely fellowship began to take shape. A warrior, a scholar, and a midge united by a desperate hope and the looming threat of a forgotten darkness. The journey ahead would be fraught with danger, but within the walls of the royal palace, a flicker of defiance had ignited. They would find the sacred sword, or they would die trying. Chapter 5. The first rays of dawn painted the sky a fiery orange as the unlikely fellowship assembled outside the imposing gates of Persepolis. Darius, clad in dark leather armor and wielding his scimitar with practiced ease, eyed his companions with a mix of skepticism and grudging respect. Aisha, her scholar's robes surprisingly practical for the rugged journey ahead, clutched a satchel filled with scrolls and maps. Reza, the ancient midge, leaned heavily on his staff, his eyes twinkling with an unsettling amusement. A string of heavily laden mules, provisioned 4 weeks in the unforgiving mountains, stood patiently. A small contingent of royal guards, handpicked by Darius himself, completed the picture. King Azulu stood before them, his regal bearing momentarily at odds with the worry etched on his face. He addressed the group, his voice firm. "The fate of Persia rests on your shoulders. The Jebel Bar Mountains are a treacherous realm, filled with unforgiving terrain and unknown dangers. But I have faith in your abilities." He turned to Darius, his gaze steady. "Captain, the safety of this group is your responsibility. Use your skills, your cunning. Bring them back to me." Darius met the king's gaze, a flicker of understanding passing between them. He didn't believe in the legend of the sacred sword any more than Azulu did, but the fear in the people's eyes and the desperation in the king's voice were undeniable. He would see this mission through, if only to prove the futility of the whole endeavor. With a curt nod, Darius mounted his prized stallion, a sleek black mare named Zura. Aisha, with a surprising amount of agility, clambered onto a sturdy mule, while Riza settled himself onto another, his weathered face hidden beneath the wide brim of his pointed hat. The royal guards, faces grim beneath their helmets, mounted their own horses. With a final wave from King Azulu, the unlikely band spurred their steeds forward, the gates of Persepolis groaning shut behind them. The journey began innocently enough. Lush valleys gave way to rolling hills dotted with wildflowers, the air crisp and clean. Aisha, her initial apprehension fading, pointed out ancient ruins barely visible amongst the foliage, whispering tales of forgotten civilizations. Riza, ever the observer, documented the flora and fauna in his leather-bound journal, muttering cryptic pronouncements about the interconnectedness of nature and magic. Darius, however, remained focused. He kept a watchful eye on the horizon, constantly scanning for any sign of danger. The tranquility of the landscape did little to quell the unease that gnawed at him. These were not the idyllic mountains he'd pictured. These were ancient, primordial, and held a palpable hostility towards outsiders. As days bled into weeks, the terrain grew more treacherous. The rolling hills gave way to jagged cliffs and treacherous gorges. The once vibrant landscape turned barren, the air thin and cold. The nights were filled with the howls of unseen creatures and the unsettling rustle of unseen movement in the undergrowth. One evening, as they huddled around a sputtering campfire, Darius surveyed his companions. Aisha, her initial enthusiasm dampened by the harsh reality of the journey, shivered uncontrollably despite the fire's meager warmth. Riza, however, seemed to thrive in the harsh environment, his weathered face etched with a new kind of determination. Are we truly on the right path? Darius finally voiced the question that had been gnawing at him. Aisha, huddled deeper into her cloak, pointed to a map on her lap, its parchment worn and frayed. According to these ancient texts, she rasped, her voice hoarse from the thin air, there should be an abandoned watchtower marking the entrance to the Valley of Echoes, the supposed resting place of the sword. Darius grunted, unconvinced. Supposed resting place, he echoed. More like a supposed death trap if you ask me. Riza, his eyes gleaming in the firelight, chuckled. Perhaps, Captain, he said, his voice surprisingly jovial. But even death traps can hold secrets. The next day, they found the watchtower, a crumbling edifice perched precariously on the edge of a sheer cliff. Its once proud facade was marred by crumbling stone and gaping holes, the ravages of time etched into its very bones. A sense of foreboding hung heavy in the air, a feeling so palpable it made Darius' skin crawl. As they approached cautiously, a harsh screech echoed from above. A flock of enormous black birds, their wings leathery and eyes glinting with malice, swooped down, attacking with a frenzy. Chapter 6. The flock of monstrous birds descended upon the fellowship with a fury that sent chills down their spines. Darius, drawing his scimitar with practiced ease, deflected a flurry of sharp beaks and slashing talons. Aisha shrieked as a bird snatched at her satchel, sending scrolls flying in the wind. Riza, his staff held aloft, muttered a quick incantation, a burst of golden light erupting from its tip, sending one of the creatures plummeting to the ground with a screech. The remaining birds, momentarily stunned, circled overhead, their beady eyes filled with malevolent intelligence. Darius knew they wouldn't relent easily. He needed to act fast. Aisha, Riza, take cover inside the watchtower, he bellowed, his voice barely audible above the cacophony of screeches and flapping wings. Without hesitation, Aisha scrambled towards the crumbling doorway, clutching the few scrolls she managed to save. Riza followed closely behind, his staff tapping a frantic rhythm against the stone floor. Darius, his back pressed against the windswept cliff face, parried and riposted with a practiced grace. Zura, sensing the danger, whinnied nervously, pawing at the ground. Suddenly, a glint of metal caught Darius' eye. A loose stone in the crumbling wall gleamed faintly in the afternoon sun. An idea, born of desperation, sparked in his mind. With a yell that echoed across the desolate landscape, he lunged towards the wall, his shoulder slamming into the loose stone. The effect was immediate. A section of the wall gave way, crumbling outwards and raining stones down onto the unsuspecting birds below. Screeches of pain and surprise filled the air as several creatures were crushed or injured, their mangled bodies tumbling down the cliff face. The remaining ones, spooked by the sudden assault, caught angrily before taking wing and disappearing into the distance. Darius, catching his breath, surveyed the scene. Silence, thick and unsettling, had descended. He turned towards the watchtower, a grimace twisting his features. The entrance, once partially obscured by fallen rock, now stood wide open, a dark maw beckoning them deeper into the unknown. A voice, shaky but resolute, called out from within. "Darius, are you all right?" He clambered towards the entrance, his boots crunching on loose gravel. Inside, Aisha and Riza huddled together, their faces pale but relieved. "Those things," Aisha stammered, her voice trembling. "What were they?" Darius shook his head, a grim expression etched on his face. "I don't know," he admitted, "but they seem to be guardians of this place." Riza, ever the pragmatist, straightened his robes. Guardians of a watchtower? Or perhaps of what lies beyond? He gestured towards the darkness that seemed to swallow the interior of the tower. Darius felt a shiver run down his spine. They had come this far, braved the harsh landscape and monstrous birds. There was no turning back now. "We press on," he declared, his voice firm despite the trepidation in his heart. "The Valley of Echoes awaits." With a newfound resolve, they stepped into the darkness, the heavy stone door groaning shut behind them, leaving them shrouded in an inky blackness that felt heavy with secrets and the promise of danger. Chapter 7. The air inside the watchtower was thick with dust and the stench of decay. Darius, his hand outstretched, fumbled blindly along the rough stone wall, searching for a hidden mechanism or a torch sconce. Aisha, her voice barely a whisper, fumbled in her satchel for a flint and tinder. "There must be another way out," she muttered, frustration lacing her voice. "This is madness." Riza chuckled, a dry rasping sound that echoed strangely in the confined space. "Perhaps, child," he said, "but even madness has its purpose." A flicker of light materialized in the darkness, casting dancing shadows on the crumbling stone walls. Aisha, with a sigh of relief, had managed to coax a meager flame to life in a chipped oil lamp. The meager light revealed a narrow spiral staircase descending into the earth, its worn steps slick with moisture. Darius, ever the pragmatist, examined the staircase with a critical eye. "Are you sure this is safe, Riza?" he asked, his voice laced with suspicion. The old mid shrugged, his shoulders disappearing beneath his voluminous robes. "Safety is a relative concept, Captain. The only way forward is down." With a deep breath, Darius stepped onto the first step. It creaked ominously under his weight, sending a tremor of fear down his spine. Aisha followed closely behind, her hand trailing nervously along the cold stone wall. Riza brought up the rear, his staff tapping a steady rhythm against the steps. The passage descended deeper and deeper into the earth, the air growing colder and more stagnant with each step. The feeble light from the lamp barely penetrated the oppressive darkness, casting twisted, grotesque shapes on the damp walls. The silence was broken only by the rhythmic drip-drip of water and the unsettling feeling of unseen eyes watching their every move. After what felt like an eternity, the staircase finally leveled out. A narrow tunnel, barely wide enough for a single person to pass, stretched before them. The air grew thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic and ancient. "The Valley of Echoes," Aisha whispered, her voice echoing eerily in the tunnel. "This is it." Darius felt a prickle of anticipation crawl up his spine. Despite his skepticism, a sense of awe settled over him. They were deep within the heart of the Jebel Bar Mountains, in a place untouched by time or civilization. Whether this was the resting place of a legendary sword remained to be seen, but the weight of history pressed down upon him, heavy and undeniable. As they cautiously ventured deeper into the tunnel, the faint metallic scent grew stronger. The tunnel opened into a vast cavern, its ceiling lost in the inky blackness above. A shaft of pale moonlight, filtering through a crack high up in the ceiling, illuminated a scene of breathtaking beauty. A shimmering lake, its surface undisturbed, filled the center of the cavern. Strange crystals, emitting a faint ethereal glow, dotted the cavern walls, casting dancing patterns on the water's surface. And in the center of the lake, resting on a pedestal carved from a single massive obsidian block, lay a sword unlike anything Darius had ever seen. Its hilt, shaped like a stylized bird with wings outstretched, shimmered with an otherworldly light. The blade itself, seemingly forged from starlight itself, pulsed with a faint inner glow. A hush fell over the fellowship. Aisha, her eyes wide with wonder, gasped, Riza, his staff held aloft, muttered words in a language Darius couldn't understand. Even Darius, his skepticism momentarily forgotten, felt a surge of awe and a prickling sensation on his skin that spoke of ancient power. But the moment was shattered by a sound that echoed ominously through the cavern. A low growl, guttural and primal, reverberated through the walls, sending shivers down their spines. A shadow detached itself from the darkness, a monstrous creature with glowing red eyes and razor-sharp claws. The guardian of the sacred sword had awakened. The battle for Persia's future had just begun. Chapter 8. The monstrous creature emerged from the shadows, its immense size filling the cavern with a sense of dread. Its obsidian-like hide glistened with an oily sheen, reflecting the otherworldly glow emanating from the sacred sword. Razor-sharp claws scraped against the cavern floor, each scrape echoing like a death knell. Glowing red eyes, devoid of any semblance of intelligence, fixated on the intruders, a feral hunger burning within them. Darius, ever the warrior, was the first to react. He drew his scimitar with a flourish, the polished metal glinting in the faint moonlight. "Aisha, Riza, stay back," he bellowed, his voice resonating through the cavern. Aisha, her initial awe replaced by a surge of adrenaline, fumbled in her satchel. "There has to be a way to weaken it," she cried, her voice laced with desperation. Riza, his weathered face grim, gripped his staff tighter. "There might be," he rasped, his eyes scanning the cavern walls, searching for forgotten symbols or arcane sigils. Darius lunged at the creature, his scimitar arcing through the air. The beast roared, a sound that shook the very foundations of the cavern. It raised a massive claw, deflecting the blow with a clang that sent a tremor through Darius' arm. The creature retaliated with lightning speed, its other claw swiping at Darius, leaving a deep gash across his chest. Pain lanced through Darius, but he gritted his teeth, refusing to yield. He rolled away from the creature's next attack, his mind racing for a strategy. This beast was unlike anything he'd ever faced, its strength and ferocity unmatched. He needed to fight smart, to exploit a weakness. Aisha, her voice barely a whisper, called out from behind him. "Darius, look!" He glanced back to see her pointing at a series of intricate carvings adorning the base of the obsidian pedestal where the sacred sword rested. They resembled swirling constellations, symbols that seemed vaguely familiar. Suddenly, a memory flashed through Darius' mind, a fragment of a forgotten tale whispered by a caravan storyteller years ago. A tale of celestial guardians, protectors of sacred sites, vulnerable to the light of their celestial counterparts. He looked at the glowing crystals embedded in the cavern walls, their faint ethereal glow mimicking the night sky. Could that be the weakness? With a renewed surge of determination, Darius grabbed a handful of loose pebbles from the cavern floor. He launched them one by one, aiming for the crystals farthest from the sword, strategically disrupting the pattern of the ethereal light. As each crystal was struck, the creature roared in pain, its glowing red eyes flickering erratically. With each disruption, the creature's movements became less coordinated, its attacks less ferocious. A glimmer of hope ignited within Darius. His unorthodox strategy was working. Riza, seeing the shift in the battle, seized his opportunity. He chanted a long-forgotten incantation, his voice rising and falling in a rhythmic cadence. The air crackled with energy, and a shimmering orb of pure light materialized at the tip of his staff. With a flick of his wrist, he hurled the orb at the creature. It struck the beast squarely in the chest, causing it to shriek in agony and recoil. Darius, seizing the moment, lunged forward. He sidestepped a swipe from the creature's claw and with a powerful swing of his scimitar, aimed for the beast's exposed flank. The blade connected with a sickening thud, leaving a deep gash across the creature's obsidian hide. The beast roared in fury, but the blow seemed to sap its remaining strength. It stumbled back, then with a final, earth-shaking tremor, collapsed onto the cavern floor, lifeless. Silence descended upon the cavern, broken only by the ragged gasps of Darius as he clutched his wounded chest. Aisha and Riza hurried to his side, their faces etched with relief and concern. "You did it, Darius," Aisha breathed, her voice filled with awe. "You outsmarted it." Riza, examining Darius wound with practiced hands, nodded grimly. "A valiant victory," he said, "but a costly one." Darius winced as Riza cleaned the wound with a poultice made from crushed herbs he pulled from his satchel. "The sword," he rasped, his voice weak. "We can't leave it now." Aisha, her gaze fixed on the glowing blade, nodded in agreement. They had come too far, sacrificed too much, to turn back now. With a collective deep breath, they approached the obsidian pedestal. Chapter 9. As Darius reached out to grasp the hilt of the sacred sword, a surge of energy coursed through the cavern. The crystals embedded in the walls flared brightly, bathing the chamber in an ethereal light. The very air crackled with power, a tangible force that sent shivers down their spines. Aisha and Riza stumbled back, momentarily blinded by the sudden brilliance. Darius, however, persevered. He gripped the hilt, its cool metal surprisingly comforting against his calloused hand. The moment he touched the sword, a wave of images, memories, and emotions flooded his mind. He saw ancient battles fought under celestial skies, heard the clash of steel and the roar of mythical beasts. He felt the unwavering resolve of a warrior wielding this very blade, a champion imbued with celestial power. The visions receded as quickly as they came, leaving Darius breathless and overwhelmed. He opened his eyes to see the cavern bathed in a soft, celestial light emanating from the blade itself. The inscription etched onto the hilt, previously obscured, now glowed with a faint inner light, revealing itself to be an ancient language. Aisha, her voice barely a whisper, gasped, "It's responding to you, Darius. You are the chosen one." Riza, his brow furrowed in concentration, studied the inscription. "It speaks of a worthy champion," he muttered, tracing the symbols with his finger. "One who possesses courage, strength, and a pure heart." Darius looked down at the blade, the weight of responsibility settling upon him like a tangible burden. He wasn't a hero, not in the traditional sense. He was a warrior, a survivor, a man who obeyed orders and fought for his kingdom. But as he held the sword, a newfound resolve ignited within him. He understood, in that instant, the gravity of the situation. The fate of Persia rested upon his shoulders. "We need to get back," he declared, his voice firm despite the lingering effects of his wound. "Azulu needs to know." Aisha and Riza exchanged glances, a mixture of worry and respect etched on their faces. They helped Darius to his feet, his legs shaky and his vision blurred. The journey back seemed to take an eternity. Each step was an agonizing ordeal, but Darius pressed on, fueled by a newfound purpose. Finally, after what felt like days, they emerged from the watchtower, blinking in the harsh sunlight. The sight of the rugged mountainscape brought a wave of relief, a reminder of the world beyond the cavern's ethereal glow. The royal guards, who had remained vigilant throughout their absence, rushed forward with a mixture of relief and concern. News of their encounter with the monstrous guardian and Darius' daring feat spread like wildfire. The return journey to Persepolis was a triumphant one. Darius, despite his injuries, rode at the head of the group, the sacred sword held high. Villagers lined the roads, cheering for their unlikely hero. Aisha and Riza rode beside him, their faces etched with a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The gates of Persepolis swung open to welcome them home. King Azulu, his face haggard with worry, rushed forward to embrace Darius. Relief and gratitude shone in his eyes. "You have done it, Darius," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You have brought back hope." Darius, his voice hoarse but filled with conviction, replied, "We have, Your Majesty, but the true battle has just begun." News of the discovery of the sacred sword spread like wildfire throughout Persia. Hope, flickering like a dying ember, rekindled in the hearts of the people. With a champion chosen and a celestial weapon in hand, they could finally fight back against the encroaching darkness. But the true test of the legend, the true test of Darius's courage, was yet to come. Chapter 10. Weeks turned into months as Persia buzzed with newfound purpose. Blacksmiths toiled day and night, forging new weapons and armor based on ancient designs unearthed by Aisha in forgotten scrolls. Training grounds echoed with the clang of steel and the determined shouts of soldiers, their morale boosted by the legend of the sacred sword. Darius, however, remained restless. The visions that flooded his mind upon touching the sword continued to haunt him. They spoke of a coming war, not just against the encroaching sickness, but against a powerful enemy wielding dark magic. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that the sacred sword alone wouldn't be enough. One evening, as he nursed his healing wounds in the palace gardens, Aisha approached him, a scroll clutched in her hand. "Darius," she said, her voice laced with urgency, "I believe I may have found something." She unfurled the scroll, revealing a faded map depicting a vast mountainous region far to the east, a land shrouded in myth and legend, the Dragon Spine Mountains. According to the inscription, a hidden monastery resided within its treacherous peaks, a sanctuary for an ancient order known as the Sky Guardians. These Sky Guardians, Aisha explained, tracing the inscription with her finger, are rumored to be warriors blessed with the power of the skies. Perhaps they can be our allies in the coming battle. Darius studied the map, a flicker of hope igniting within him. An alliance with such warriors could be the key to turning the tide. We need to find this monastery, he declared, his resolve hardening. Aisha smiled, a glimmer of excitement in her eyes. Then let's prepare for a journey, Captain. The Dragon Spine Mountains await. The journey to the Dragon Spine Mountains was even more arduous than their trek to the Jebel Bar. The air grew thinner, the temperatures harsher. The landscape, a treacherous labyrinth of jagged peaks and treacherous ice crevasses, tested their endurance to the limit. Even the ever-optimistic Aisha found her spirit dampened by the unforgiving environment. After weeks of perilous travel, guided by cryptic clues deciphered from ancient scrolls, they finally stumbled upon a hidden valley nestled amongst the highest peaks. A shimmering waterfall cascaded down a sheer cliff face, and nestled behind it, shrouded in mist, lay a magnificent monastery carved from the living rock. The gates of the monastery creaked open upon their arrival, revealing a wizened old monk with eyes as sharp as eagles and a beard that flowed like a white river. He surveyed them with a detached curiosity, his silence heavy with anticipation. Darius, ever the pragmatist, stepped forward. He explained their quest, the threat posed by the encroaching darkness, and their desperate need for the Sky Guardian's aid. As he spoke, he held aloft the sacred sword, the celestial light emanating from the blade illuminating the cavernous entrance hall. The old monk remained silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the sword. Finally, he spoke, his voice raspy with age. "The prophecy has come to pass," he rasped. "The champion has arrived, wielding the blade of light. But darkness cannot be vanquished by light alone." He gestured them inside, the heavy stone doors grinding shut behind them. The monastery, despite its austere exterior, held a surprising warmth. A gentle hum resonated through the air, a feeling of power and serenity that soothed Darius' weary soul. For days, they remained within the monastery walls, undergoing rigorous training under the tutelage of the Sky Guardians. Darius learned to channel the celestial energy flowing through the sacred sword, his movements becoming imbued with an otherworldly grace. Aisha delved into ancient texts detailing the nature of the coming darkness, its weaknesses, and the forgotten magic used to combat it. Reza, ever the pragmatist, focused on learning techniques to weave his magic with the Sky Guardian's celestial abilities, creating a potent defensive barrier. Finally, the day of their departure arrived. The Sky Guardians, clad in flowing white robes and wielding weapons imbued with celestial energy, stood alongside the newly trained Persian soldiers. Darius, radiating newfound confidence, held the sacred sword high. He looked at his companions, a motley crew united by a common purpose. "We fight for Persia," he declared, his voice ringing through the crisp mountain air. "We fight for hope, and together we will prevail." A chorus of cheers erupted from the assembled warriors. The air crackled with anticipation, a storm brewing on the horizon. The fight for Persia, the fight for the light, was about to begin. They descended from the monastery, a beacon of hope against the encroaching darkness, ready to face whatever horrors about to unfold. Chapter 11. The descent from the Dragon Spine Mountains was swift, a determined march fueled by newfound hope and purpose. Days bled into nights, the landscape transforming from snow-capped peaks to rolling plains dotted with dusty villages. News of their journey, whispers of a legendary champion wielding a celestial sword, had preceded them. Villagers lined the roads, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and hope, showering Darius and his growing army with cheers and offerings. As they neared the borders of Persia, a dark cloud appeared on the horizon, a sickly, unnatural shade that choked out the sunlight and cast an oppressive gloom over the land. A cold wind, carrying the stench of decay, whipped at their faces, sending shivers down their spines. This was it, the front lines of the encroaching darkness. Darius halted the army on a rise overlooking a desolate landscape. In the distance, a sprawling fortress of twisted black stone dominated the horizon. Spiked towers pierced the gloom, and monstrous figures patrolled the ramparts, their red eyes glowing like embers in the unnatural darkness. This was the source of the sickness, the heart of the enemy's domain. Aisha, her face grim, pointed to a tattered scroll clutched in her hand. "The Shadow Fortress," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. "The legendary prison of the Devourer, an ancient entity of pure darkness." Reza, his staff held aloft, muttered a quick incantation, a faint golden light emanating from the amethyst tip. The scroll spoke of a powerful barrier protecting the fortress, he rasped. A barrier fueled by the Devourer's darkness. But he trailed off, his brow furrowed in concentration. "But what?" Darius demanded, his hand tightening on the hilt of the sacred sword. "But there seems to be a tear in the barrier," Reza continued, pointing towards a shimmering breach in the black energy field encasing the fortress. "A weakness, perhaps." Hope flared in Darius' chest. A weakness meant an opportunity. He drew the sacred sword, the celestial light emanating from the blade pushing back the encroaching darkness for a few precious feet. He addressed his army, his voice ringing with conviction. "Warriors of Persia, we have come this far, united by hope and forged in the fires of adversity. Today, we fight not just for our kingdom, but for the very light that sustains life itself. The Devourer and its darkness will be vanquished." The soldiers roared in agreement, their weapons raised high. Aisha, her face resolute, stepped forward. "Darius, follow the tear in the barrier. Reza and I will focus our magic on strengthening your celestial aura, providing you with the power to breach the fortress." Darius nodded, a silent understanding passing between them. With a final, rallying cry, he charged forward, a beacon of light leading the charge against the encroaching darkness. The assault on the Shadow Fortress was a brutal ballet of steel and shadow. Darius, fueled by the combined power of the sacred sword, Aisha's arcane knowledge, and Reza's potent magic, cut a swathe through the enemy ranks. Grotesque creatures, their forms twisted by the Devourer's influence, fell before his celestial blade, dissolving into wisps of dark smoke. However, for every creature slain, two more seemed to materialize from the shadows. The air grew thick with the stench of decay, and the chilling whispers of the Devourer gnawed at the edges of Darius' mind. He pressed on, fueled by a desperate hope and the cheers of his soldiers battling valiantly at his back. Finally, he reached the tear in the barrier. A swirling vortex of darkness pulsed within, threatening to consume him. He braced himself, channeling the celestial energy coursing through him. With a thunderous roar, he lunged into the vortex, the world dissolving into a chaotic kaleidoscope of light and shadow. He emerged inside the fortress, greeted by a cavernous throne room. A hulking figure sat upon the throne, its form shrouded in darkness, tendrils of inky smoke swirling around it. Two glowing red eyes, filled with an ancient malice, locked onto Darius. This was the Devourer, the embodiment of all-consuming darkness. A guttural voice, as if emanating from the very fabric of reality, echoed through the chamber. "You dare enter my domain, mortal," the Devourer rasped. "Foolish champion. Darkness shall consume all." Darius, his voice steady despite the overwhelming presence, raised the sacred sword. "The light will prevail," he declared. "The people of Persia will not be consumed by your darkness." The Devourer laughed. Chapter 12. The Devourer's laughter echoed through the throne room, a sound like grinding stone and the wail of tormented souls. It shook the very foundation of the fortress, sending tremors through the floor and showering Darius with dust and debris. Unfazed, Darius held his ground, the sacred sword humming with celestial energy, a beacon of light in the oppressive darkness. "Light," the Devourer boomed, its voice dripping with malice. "A fleeting illusion. Darkness is eternal, the natural state of existence. You fight a losing battle, champion." Darius ignored the Devourer's taunts. He had witnessed the power of light firsthand. He had seen hope rekindled in the eyes of his people, the fear replaced by a newfound determination. The light wouldn't win because it was eternal, but because it represented the enduring spirit of humanity, the will to fight for survival and a better future. Gathering his strength, he channeled the combined energies of the sacred sword, Aisha's magic, and Reza's protective aura. The sword pulsed with a blinding light, forcing the Devourer to recoil and shield its glowing red eyes with a skeletal hand. The air crackled with raw power, the very fabric of reality straining under the pressure. You may hold back the darkness for a time, the devourer hissed, its voice laced with a hint of fear. But eventually, it will consume all. Darius knew it wouldn't be easy. The devourer was an ancient entity, its power vast and corrupting. But he also knew that darkness thrived on fear and despair. By standing his ground, by embodying hope and defiance, he could break the devourer's hold on the land. He lunged forward, the sacred sword slicing through the inky tendrils that lashed out at him. He parried blows from shadowy claws that materialized from the darkness, each clang ringing like a victory cry. His movements were swift and precise, guided by the celestial energy coursing through his veins. The battle raged on, a dance of light and shadow. Darius fought with the ferocity of a cornered wolf, fueled by the knowledge that the fate of Persia rested on his shoulders. He landed blows that sent shockwaves through the darkness, momentarily pushing the devourer back. But with each blow, he felt his energy waning, the strain of wielding such immense power taking its toll. Suddenly, a voice pierced through the chaos. "Darius, look up!" Aisha's voice echoed, laced with urgency. He glanced upward to see a shimmering tear in the cavern ceiling, a breach in the barrier they had fought so hard to maintain. A shaft of moonlight, the first light to touch the fortress in generations, streamed through the opening, illuminating a section of the throne room floor. Just as the devourer lunged forward for a final, crushing blow, Darius leaped back, landing on the moonlit patch of floor. A surge of celestial energy coursed through him, revitalizing his weary body. He looked at the devourer, a plan forming in his mind. With a battle cry that echoed through the chamber, he charged. He didn't aim for the devourer itself, but for the shadowy tendrils that anchored it to the throne. The blade of the sacred sword, empowered by the moonlight, sliced through the tendrils with ease. The devourer shrieked in agony, its form writhing and contorting as its connection to the fortress waned. Seizing the opportunity, Darius launched himself at the devourer, aiming for its exposed red eyes. The devourer raised a skeletal hand in a futile attempt to block the blow. The celestial blade pierced through the hand and sank deep into the creature's eye. A blinding flash of light erupted from the wound, momentarily engulfing the chamber in its brilliance. When the light subsided, the devourer was gone. Only a faint wisp of smoke remained, a fleeting reminder of the darkness it embodied. The oppressive atmosphere dissipated, replaced by a cool, refreshing breeze that seemed to carry the scent of blooming flowers. The tear in the ceiling widened, and moonlight flooded the throne room, bathing everything in a gentle, ethereal glow. Darius, drained but victorious, slumped to the ground, the sacred sword clattering beside him. Aisha and Riza rushed to his side, their faces etched with relief and awe. Cheers erupted from outside the fortress, echoing through the corridors and halls. The news of the devourer's defeat spread like wildfire. Chapter 13. As Darius looked out at the shadow fortress bathed in moonlight, a wave of exhaustion washed over him. His muscles screamed in protest, and the taste of metallic tang filled his mouth. But a sense of profound satisfaction coursed through him, a sense that he had achieved something extraordinary. The devourer was vanquished, its hold on the land broken. A new dawn had risen for Persia. Aisha and Riza helped him to his feet, their faces etched with relief and awe. Cheers erupted from outside the fortress, echoing through the corridors and halls. The news of the devourer's defeat spread like wildfire, carried on the cool night breeze that now whispered through the previously stagnant air. Darius, his voice hoarse but firm, addressed the assembled soldiers who had stormed the fortress with him. They were a motley crew, battle-scarred veterans alongside eager young recruits, all united in their defiance against the darkness. "Warriors of Persia," he bellowed, his voice hoarse but ringing with pride, "we have achieved a victory beyond measure. The devourer is no more, and the light shines upon our land once again." A thunderous roar of approval erupted from the crowd. Darius felt a surge of warmth spread through him, a feeling of immense gratitude for the brave men and women who had stood beside him. This victory wasn't his alone, it belonged to all of them. But amidst the elation, a flicker of concern remained. The devourer was a powerful entity, its defeat a temporary respite. The whispers in his mind, the visions gleaned from the sacred sword, spoke of a larger threat, a force that sought to extinguish the light forever. They needed to be prepared. Days turned into weeks as the aftermath of the battle unfolded. The shadow fortress, now bathed in cleansing moonlight, became a symbol of hope. Darius, hailed as a hero, toured the land, his presence a beacon of reassurance and a reminder of their hard-won victory. Meanwhile, Aisha and Riza delved deeper into the ancient scrolls, searching for any clues about the greater darkness Darius had glimpsed in his visions. They discovered fragmented prophecies, cryptic warnings of a coming storm, and a malevolent entity known only as the Shadow King. Knowledge was power, but it was also a heavy burden. Darius knew they couldn't afford to be complacent. He ordered the strengthening of border defenses, the training of new recruits, and the stockpiling of resources. He also sought the counsel of Persia's wisest scholars and mags, hoping to learn more about ancient rituals and forgotten magic that could aid them in the coming battle. One evening, as Darius sat in the palace gardens, contemplating the weight of his responsibility, a familiar voice broke the silence. It was Ilera, the young sorceress who had once served the corrupt Grand Vizier. She approached him hesitantly, her eyes filled with a newfound humility. "Darius," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "I heard about the Devourer's defeat. Congratulations." Darius regarded her cautiously. He remembered her treachery well, her willingness to aid the Grand Vizier in his quest for power. "What do you want, Ilera?" he asked, his voice firm. Ilera took a deep breath. I made a mistake," she stammered. "I was blinded by ambition, but the darkness it offered left me hollow. I wish to atone for my actions. I can help you prepare for what's coming." Darius studied her face, searching for any sign of deceit. He saw only sincerity and a flicker of fear in her eyes, fear of the very darkness she had once embraced. Perhaps, he thought, she could be an asset. "Very well, Ilera," he said, his voice measured. "Tell me what you know about the Shadow King." Ilera's eyes widened in surprise. "You know," she stammered. Darius nodded curtly. "We have reason to believe it is the true source of the darkness plaguing our land." Ilera, her voice trembling slightly, began to speak. She revealed fragments of forbidden lore she had gleaned while serving the Grand Vizier, whispers of a being of immense power, a master of shadows who sought to engulf the world in eternal night. As Darius listened, a chill ran down his spine. The fragmented picture that emerged was far more terrifying than he had imagined. The Devourer was merely a harbinger, a foot soldier in a much larger war. The battle for Persia was far from over. It was a prelude to a clash that could decide the fate of the entire world. Chapter 14. The weight of responsibility settled upon Darius like a suffocating cloak. The whispers in his mind, once vague and unsettling, now coalesced into a horrifying vision, a world consumed by darkness, ruled by the enigmatic Shadow King. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that the fight for Persia was just the opening act in a grander, more terrifying conflict. Ilera, her face etched with a desperate sincerity, continued her revelations. She spoke of ancient rituals, powerful artifacts said to hold the key to banishing the darkness, and hidden sanctuaries where forgotten magic resided. Some were mere whispers in forgotten scrolls, others, locations lost to time. Days turned into weeks as Darius and his advisors pored over ancient texts and consulted with scholars and mags from all corners of the kingdom. They mapped out potential locations of these mythical artifacts, debating the feasibility of retrieval missions and the potential dangers involved. The air crackled with a renewed sense of urgency. Despite the heavy burden of leadership, Darius found solace in the unwavering support of his companions. Aisha, her optimism tempered with newfound caution, meticulously researched ancient magical traditions. Riza, ever the pragmatist, focused on developing defensive strategies and fortifying border defenses. Ilera, eager to prove her loyalty, delved into the forbidden lore she once coveted, searching for any weaknesses in the Shadow King's formidable power. News of the Devourer's defeat spread far and wide. Embassies arrived from neighboring kingdoms, some seeking alliances, others wary of Persia's newfound power. Darius, recognizing the need for a united front, forged diplomatic ties, pledging to share his knowledge of the Shadow King and offering assistance in their own battles against the encroaching darkness. One evening, as Darius was reviewing reports from his scouts, a messenger arrived, bearing urgent news. A band of nomadic raiders, known for their barbarity and affinity for dark magic, had infiltrated a remote village on the western border. They bore a chilling symbol, the Stygian raven, the herald of the Shadow King. Darius slammed his fist on the table, anger coursing through him. He wouldn't allow the darkness to fester on his doorstep. "Assemble the army," he declared, his voice thick with resolve. "We ride at dawn." The journey to the raided village was arduous, a trek through treacherous mountain passes and desolate plains. The once vibrant village they encountered upon arrival was a scene of utter devastation. Homes lay in smoldering ruins, the stench of death hung heavy in the air, and the few survivors bore chilling tales of the raiders' cruelty and their allegiance to the Shadow King. A fierce anger burned in Darius' chest, an anger fueled by a determination to protect his people from such horrors. They tracked the raiders through a labyrinthine canyon system, guided by the faint whispers of dark magic in the air. Finally, they came upon a hidden valley, a desolate wasteland pulsating with an unnatural energy. In the center of the valley stood a towering obsidian monolith, its surface etched with malevolent symbols that pulsed with a sickly green light. Darius recognized it instantly from Ilaire's descriptions: the conduit, a channel for the Shadow King's corrupting influence. The raiders, led by a hulking brute adorned in black armor, awaited them at the base of the monolith. A guttural war cry erupted from their ranks, a chorus of hatred and devotion to the encroaching darkness. Darius knew this wouldn't be an easy battle. These weren't mere raiders, they were fanatics, imbued with the Shadow King's power. The battle commenced with a clash of steel and dark magic. Aisha unleashed potent bursts of arcane energy, dispelling the shadows that ride around the enemy warriors. Riza erected shimmering shields of light, deflecting bolts of dark energy hurled by the Shadow King's champions. Darius, wielding the sacred sword, cut a swathe through the enemy ranks, the celestial energy pulsing from the blade banishing the encroaching darkness momentarily. But the raiders fought with a reckless abandon, fueled by a dark fervor. For every one Darius struck down, two more seemed to rise from the shadows. He felt his strength waning, the oppressive atmosphere draining his energy. Suddenly, a sickening crack echoed through the valley. The obsidian monolith, weakened by Aisha's and Riza's relentless attacks, began to crumble. Darius saw his opportunity. With a surge of remaining strength, he charged towards the lead raider, his blade aimed for the pulsating symbol etched on the brute's chest armor. The blow connected with a sickening thud. The lead raider shrieked in agony, a wave of dark energy erupting from his chest as the symbol shattered. A chain reaction followed, the obsidian monolith shuddering violently as cracks snaked across its surface. The symbol on the lead raider's chest, now shattered, pulsed with a final, blinding flash of green light before dissolving into nothingness. The raider crumpled to the ground, lifeless. The other raiders faltered, their dark magic sputtering and dying. The oppressive atmosphere in the valley lifted, replaced by a cool breeze that carried the faint scent of rain. The sky, previously choked with swirling shadows, began to reveal a few hesitant stars. With a deafening roar, the monolith finally shattered, exploding outwards in a shower of obsidian shards. A shockwave rippled through the valley, knocking Darius to his knees. He shielded his eyes with his arm as debris rained down around him. When the dust settled, the valley looked different. The sickly green glow that emanated from the monolith was gone, replaced by a faint, ethereal light that seemed to shimmer from the ground itself. The air, while still heavy with the aftermath of battle, felt lighter, almost hopeful. Darius rose to his feet, his body aching but a wave of relief washing over him. They had done it. They had not only defeated the raiders, but they had also severed the conduit to the Shadow King's dark influence. Aisha and Riza hurried to his side, their faces etched with a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. "We did it, Darius," Aisha gasped, her voice hoarse but filled with pride. Darius nodded, the weight on his shoulders momentarily lighter. He looked at the shattered remains of the monolith, a symbol of their victory against the encroaching darkness. Yet, a nagging worry remained. "This is just a battle," he said, his voice grim. "The war is far from over." Riza, his staff held aloft, sniffed the air cautiously. "The darkness is fading," he admitted, "but there's still a faint trace, a whisper lurking at the edges." Darius knew he was right. The Shadow King wouldn't be easily deterred. He surveyed the remaining raiders, their once fervent faces now pale with fear. "We offer them a choice," he declared, his voice ringing through the valley. "They can renounce their allegiance to this shadow and join us in the fight for light, or face the consequences of their actions." A murmur passed through the defeated raiders. Some looked down at the ground, shame evident on their faces. Others glared at Darius, defiance flickering in their eyes. Then, a lone figure stepped forward. It was a young woman, her eyes filled with a newfound resolve. "We were deceived," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "We were promised power, a way to survive the hardships. We didn't know the true cost." Darius studied her, his gaze searching for any hint of deceit. A flicker of hope ignited within him. Perhaps, he thought, some could be redeemed. Perhaps, their desperation and fear could be turned into a force for good. He addressed the young woman. "What is your name?" "Ilara," she whispered. A wry smile touched Darius' lips. "Welcome to the light, Ilara," he said. "There is much work to be done." Chapter 15. Days later, they returned to a hero's welcome. The news of their victory against the Shadow King's minions spread like wildfire, a much-needed balm for a kingdom scarred by darkness. Darius addressed the cheering crowds, his words filled with a newfound determination. He spoke of the coming storm, of the Shadow King's threat, but also of hope, of unity, and of the resilience of the human spirit. Behind the scenes, the work continued. Aisha and Riza, with Ilara's help, delved deeper into the secrets of ancient magic, searching for ways to counter the Shadow King's overwhelming power. Darius, meanwhile, rallied neighboring kingdoms, forging alliances and sharing knowledge of the enemy they all faced. He sparred with his men, honed his swordsmanship, and prepared them for the inevitable larger conflict. He knew the victory over the raiders was a fleeting reprieve. The whispers in his mind, the echoes of the Shadow King's malice, grew stronger. The darkness might have receded, but it hadn't been vanquished. It was merely waiting, gathering its strength, for the moment to strike again. And when it did, Darius knew, they had to be ready. They had to be the light that pushed back the shadows, the beacon of hope that illuminated the path towards a brighter future, not just for Persia, but for the world. The battle for light had just begun.